and we're going to have a panel discussion about kind of defining the boundaries between product, UX, and design. Because what I've found very interesting, and this is my type of personality, I love trying to figure out how companies are working on the inside. I'm always keen to see what are people kind of, how are you structured and how do you approach your ways of working? So I might actually start with Rajiv, because you mentioned in your presentation that you're structured in pods. So when it comes to kind of, I guess, product UX design, could you give me an understanding of what a pod looks like? What are the roles within a pod? And then what is a pod responsible for?
Sure. So let me explain that with an example, right, of my own product vertical. So as I was mentioning in the beginning, my product vertical is called as seller growth, right? Now, when you think about seller growth, there are multiple aspects related to it. There's the acquisition of sellers. And then once the sellers are acquired or onboarded, we need to activate them. And once you do that, you need to also take care of engagement and retention aspect. And then there are operational aspects like cataloging, etc. Right? So all of these, whatever I mentioned, are individual pods or charters that we call us, right? And every pod or the charter has their own goals, which is aligned with the larger goal of the product vertical. So for example, the acquisition pod has a goal around onboarding, which aligns with the overall growth of the seller onboarding. Then the acquisition pod has similar goals around activation pod has similar goals around activation suppliers and engagement and retention, so on and so forth. And now once you're aligned, once your pods are aligned to a certain goal, which in turn is aligned with the product vertical, then within the pod, it operates as its own product vertical, right? So you have all the functions. So for example, at product vertical leadership, if you have product leaders, tech leaders, and business leaders, and the design leaders, at a pod level also, you reflect the same organization structure, right? So you will have like a product lead, you will have a tech lead, you will have a design lead, and a UX lead. And this is how it's just like a mirror image of the entire like vertical itself. And they have goals which are sub goals of the product vertical. So this is how a certain structure works.
Excellent. That's a really kind of nice. I always think of that as a network kind of cascading out instead of the hierarchy of a pyramid. It's more of a network of teams cascading out.
Exactly. And the benefit is that you create like autonomous pods who are very clear about their goals, and then who have all like self-contained and have all the functions which are necessary to deliver on the goals, right? And this helps us move effectively and efficiently in terms of the goals. Yeah.
Excellent. And Shreya, just from your perspective as well, I just like to, the same kind of question, which is, with those roles of product UX design and even engineering, how are you structured in terms of where are those roles sitting? Are they in pods as well, or is it more in functions?
Yeah, I mean, so there'll definitely be different charters, and every charter will have the product manager and the designer and the engineering team. But I think what is more important is how tightly coupled or loosely coupled these pods are, or these charters are. For example, let's say if you have a very high dependency on other charters, then if you want to incorporate something new, and in order to incorporate something new, you have to learn a lot from the other pod or the other charter, which makes you less flexible to incorporate something new in your charter. And I think that's a deterrent, in my opinion. While they should be tightly coupled enough, but free to make their own specific decision in terms of innovation or a new feature. Like Rajiv was talking about growth of the sellers and all of that. So if that's one, then it should also have, it should also be free to do something innovative, while it should also have cross correlation on other teams, which are also organized as product people, engineering, and design.
Sorry, so that's great. So is it a similar structure then? Is that what I'm understanding with charters, or can you explain what a charter is and how the charters are aligned in your organization?
Yeah, so I mean, aligned to each other.
Well, so in Rajiv's example, he said, okay, so there's an onboarding pod, there's an engagement pod, there's
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. All of these pods are the onboarding pods or the engagement pods or the growth pods, or all of them have are, in my opinion, they are operate independently as well. But they should also be free enough to have something innovative or something new on there, to incorporate something new as well. So that's my opinion there.
Excellent. No, it's a great point about how kind of intertwined they are. So we'll come back to that. I just want to jump to Jay actually, and just what I'm doing is trying to get an understanding of how people are structured to give people context for the rest of the conversation. So the same question to you, Jay, on how are you structured, and particularly with those roles of kind of product, UX, design, engineering. Is it a similar pod structure? Is it more of a classical functional structure?
So, at an org level, yes, the structure is more or less similar as what, Rajiv and Shreya has talked about, but specifically the portfolio of product which I represent is basically, platform integration products. When we talk about platform integration products, which means that all the products within the organization, we have to collaborate with them, to ensure that there is an integration of our platform, on the sub products with the external parties, right? So we are in the sort of a messy middle, so to say, where you have to align the expectations of the internal products, but at the same time you have to align with the platform expectations, which we are partnering with. So there is a lot of collaboration with the internal product teams. There is a lot of collaboration with the multiple engineering teams. But on the UX level, since, as I said, we are transitioning ourselves from a multi-product family to a platform, the UX strategy is very common, which cuts across the organization like integration. So there we, directly align, and the messaging which goes to the customer is the same, is very consistent. So a UX organization cutting across the various products and the integration are in parallel with each other, whereas the various product groups are vertical. So it lays, gives you a lay of land, like, how do we interact with multiple teams?
Excellent. Okay, so my understanding, like, so you have a shared kind of services of, or a shared.
Exactly. Yeah, that's great.
So just touching on Shreya's point there, just to dig a little bit deeper, with a platform, you almost become very kind of integrated, and what was it, tight coupling was the wording that you used. So how do you, and I'll just direct this one to Jay first, but I'll be bouncing around as well. How do you manage that coupling, in that you make sure that you're enabling the teams and not accidentally kind of restricting them from that innovative type of work that they need to do?
Yes. So what do we do is that, at an organizational level, we have, find the OKRs, right? So objectives and results are already defined. So where we as an organization are moving, in every year, like what's our themes on an yearly basis, on an annual basis, this exercise is done. And once the OKRs are identified, then we come on to our quarterly roadmaps, right? That, every team will be having a quarterly roadmap, and with the help of the tools, we identify what is the dependency, like on the other team. And that's how, we have got these big room planning sessions within the organization where, if the integration which I am building, for a platform, and which the product which it is touching in this quarter, their product managers and their design teams will also join. So we can, talk about that, we are shipping this and we have got a dependency on your, on the UI element of it. So we ensure that, when we are going towards a quarter, we are going as, highlighting all the dependencies which we have got on our team. It's not easy because, we're talking about here a lot of cross-functional kind of alignment. But, that's how we, do it on a quarterly basis. Every 45 days, we get together and we see that, what is the progress which we have, on the objectives which we have identified. What is our roadmap and how are we, shipping the features accordingly. So it's basically a cross-functional collaboration on a periodic basis. When I say periodic, every 6 to 8 weeks, that's we align with the various departments in the company.
Excellent. Yeah, I'd love to hear, Shreya, since you kind of raised the point about coupling, do you follow a similar approach, or how do you manage the fact that ideally teams are isolated, but in reality, there is always going to be some overlap?
Yeah, I mean, teams are isolated. You can say that it's a different charter, so it's a different set of product PMs or engineering or design is different there. But you also have goals I'm just telling from design point of view that you'll have a shared goal, right? What you envision the product to be from the design standpoint or from the user standpoint. You would have a shared goal, which would be across all the charters. That shared goal will have a common user objective that you want to build. You want to get more. You want to make it very easy or very simple for your user. So that there'll be a common principles that your team would be aligned to. So that will try to handle those dependency that we are working as a team towards same goal. So even if we have a dependency on you, our shared goal should enable us to work together.
Do you ever have conflicts? So I'll just give an example where, like, I worked with two teams and they had their OKRs, if you use that, and then one of them needed a lot more collaboration. So there had to be an agreement to focus less on what their core objective was, even though it's the organization's objective, but one team had to sacrifice their kind of focus. Do you have examples of that?
Yeah, I mean, that's when I was talking about the sweet spot that you want to attain when you're working with different teams together. That you want to, whenever you have a conflict, whenever I have a conflict, or whenever I'm trying to give my point of view, like a design point of view, while trying to understand a business point of view, I also want to achieve a sweet spot that we are going towards. And that sweet spot is kind of challenging to get at first, in the first version, maybe in V0 or something. But that and they would know that how much you have compromised to get into V0. So it'll be easier to come to a decision later. Maybe it's difficult in the beginning, but with time, it's easier to come in. You try to have the influential attitude that I was telling about, when you try to convince them that why are you trying to pitch for this particular design, what's the reason that this design will make your users adopt this feature. So if you're able to communicate that well, I think then that plays that extra role in resolving that conflict with other teams.
Always back to people, relationships, and communication, which it's so true. It's what you need. Great. And Rajiv, the example that just immediately pops to mind with that structure is, if you've charged somebody with acquisition, they might get a lot of people, but they're not the right people, which then makes makes conversions job harder. So how do you kind of, with your structure that you described, how do you manage those kind of conflicts, or where you need collaboration between teams?
Sure. So I think your question has two parts. One is, when you're structured in a way that there is a certain handoff happening, for example, in this case, from the acquisition part to the activation part, how do you ensure that the at least whatever required is maintaining a certain bar or the quality, right? So in our sense, I mean, how do you manage that is, when you talk about the acquisition charter, their goals will not only be around acquisition, but also the quality of the acquisition. So you get the acquisition number, but you also ensure that there is a check metric around what is the quality of the the sellers or the users that you are onboarding, right? And only once you have met that, so your goals will be twofold. One is the acquisition metric as well as the check metric. So that's one part of it. I think your next set of question is, even when you're on pod structures, there will always be, when you're executing, there will be dependency across, like how Shreya was saying and Jay was saying, right? Dependency across multiple teams. Now, this obviously, in theory, pods are supposed to be created in a messy way so that they are self-contained, etc., etc. But you and I know that it doesn't happen always like that, right? So I have personally seen three types of dependencies, right? It could be more, but broadly you can categorize into three. One is when the dependency is very, very it's not very high, like the effort is not very high. And in that point of time, it's like relationships works the best, right? As you were saying, like you have like probably a week's worth of effort. Hey, you know what, you help me out this time, next time around I will ensure that you have something, I will help you out, right? So it's the effort, like if the dependency is of a smaller magnitude, I think relationships works out in terms of how the pods collaborate. Then the second type is wherein the dependency on the other pod is considerable enough so that if they were to help you, they will have to deprioritize something from their end, right? But it is important for you. It is not important from their scheme of things. Now this becomes tricky, right? Now, how do you solve this? Is like we have tried various ways. One is via like processes, wherein, as Jay was saying, at the beginning of the planning cycle, you kind of have a view that there will be this dependency, and you earmark a certain capacity, saying that I will have the dependency 1 month down the line. I need help from you, and you kind of do that handshake at the beginning of the planning cycle. So they have accounted for it, right? Obviously, when you get into it, things can change, etc. But this handshake helps in expectation setting at a later point in time. So that's another way of doing it. The third way of which happens is the like strategic projects at a company level, which has like a leadership buy-in. And in that case, things are slightly much more easier, wherein the leadership has said that, hey, you know what, this is a project and you have to execute it no matter what, because it's a strategic priority. And in that case, you have like in our case, you have sometimes our lead product manager and supporting PMs of each of the pods. And it is a given that in a planning cycle, this has been a strategic project, and every pod needs to kind of participate in taking that through. So these are the three ways and three different ways I have seen happening. Another way, which I have personally tried to do with decent amount of success, is what I term it as like an open source model, right? Wherein if you look at it, if your code base is healthy enough, if you have good unit test cases, if you have really good guardrails, someone from other pod can also contribute towards your code base, right? So if you have dependency, you can actually contribute towards other pods code base, go through like a PR, CR review, and then ensure that that code base gets into that, right? And you need to ensure that the teams are enabled to make that happen. So you need to ensure that there is proper documentation, there's a processor, or etc. there. But this is another way that I have tried to manage the dependencies and has worked in a lot of cases.
Excellent. Yeah, I like that approach. It's kind of, I've heard a lot of people doing inner sourcing, where everything gets published to their internal kind of things, and anybody, like when they're pulling their system, it's pulling hundreds of packages together that anybody can contribute to. So that's a great approach. I want to touch on, because I think everybody's talked about it now. So back to, I guess, the roles. One of the key things, if you were looking at Marty Kagan or kind of one of those thought leaders in product management, they say the product manager is responsible for the vision of the product. They're responsible for the kind of the strategy and the roadmap. I'd love to get a sense in your organizations, if you have this kind of split up of different pods, who is responsible? Is it more of a senior management or setting that through? I guess I might start with you, Jay, because you mentioned your OKR process, and where those OKRs are being set quarterly and then kind of cascading down. So is there, how much autonomy do the teams have for setting their own kind of vision of the product and the strategy, and how much is it coming from more senior management?
So there's no clear answer to it, to be honest, Rory, because, you know, as Rajiv already highlighted, if it's a strategic product, right, if it's a strategic delivery, then all hands on the deck, right? Then priorities, and it does not happen very often, but when it happens, then, you know, priorities will take a backseat. But, you know, in a normal circumstances, you know, a product manager is indeed responsible for everything that is related to product, right? So, you know, basically we own the entire ship, right? Everything that relates to a product, which is involving, you know, even though we can have dependencies, we can cite dependencies, but we have to ensure that, you know, other teams are also getting involved. And the idea is that, you know, these are our objectives. This is our roadmap, and these roadmaps should be met. And you go ahead and give your best shot, right? And then you use all sort of tools, you know, which are available at your disposal, by meaning that, you know, you use your, you know, PR, you use your relationship with developers, you know, to ensure that, you know, the product is getting shipped on the time. And there's a resource mobilization, right, in terms of like, can you actually get help from someone else if your code is standard enough, right? So it works in a multiple level, but at the end of the day, as a product manager, it becomes our responsibility to ensure that all dependencies are sorted and the product is getting shipped on time. I won't say a CEO of the product, but yes, definitely an owner, and the responsibility lies on our shoulders.
Yeah, it's the accountability without authority or something.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, in the real sense.
Yeah. Shreya, I'd love to hear. So you're slightly different, I guess, with your charters. So how does the kind of the core prioritization happen in your organization?
So I think I'll just also talk in terms of design. Like I understand that the responsibility is on the PM, but I wouldn't like, when I'm working with a PM, I wouldn't completely like you give me an entire PRD document, a long document. You tell me what all are supposed to go into it and what features are you going to put into it. I generally want to work with them while crafting the PRD, or I want to sit with them. I want to understand what they think, what their thought process is like, put my also thought process, also align with what research says, and then go ahead and build that I would not say roadmap, but what would go in this feature, what all would go in the feature, and just not let the product take the entire ownership there in terms of what is right, what are supposed to be go. Maybe what they think is supposed to be go is a hypothesis which we need to validate from users. Again, design sprint would come here to it's a 1 week time, then you can use design sprint to prototype and test something within 5 days and take it out to your users and see. A product team thinks that this is what their users want, but does it actually what their users want? Maybe you want to test it. So I would like to highlight that point, that designers should play a part here. They should step up, conduct a design sprint, work with their PMs, see if this feature or this whatever they're thinking for the product is actually what their people want or not.
Yeah, it's so many, the hippo problem of somebody thinking that they know what they need, but you always need to validate. And I'm as guilty of that. I always think I have these great ideas, and no, definitely need to validate them.
And if it takes a very long time, then maybe not, because everyone would not be open to the idea that you find it out. You may not have the time or resources to do that. That is it what your users actually want. So that's why I said maybe a short day or a 5-day process or a design sprint would help here. If you don't have a very long time, but you still want to test it out if this is something which your users are looking for.
Yeah, no, even very small pieces of information can be hugely valuable when you don't know much at the start.
Yeah.
And Rajiv, so with your kind of independent pods, do you have an OKR process? Do you have what's your kind of strategy, or do the pods kind of try to agree on their own strategies?
Yeah. So in again, our process has also evolved, and I've seen multiple processes of it. I can share the current process, which is what we follow. So we take yearly targets in terms of our goals, right? And then we have something called as a vision to strategy exercise. So you say that if these are your goals, then what is your strategy over a yearly kind of long period to achieve towards that goal, right? And this is when you look at your TAM, and then you say that, okay, what are the opportunity areas? Then you size your opportunities, and then you say that these are the 10x opportunities, and then you say that this is where I will deep dive, and these kind of things, right? So vision to strategy is mostly around identifying opportunity areas and then aligning that these are the pods which are responsible for each of these opportunity areas, right? And once you do that, then you go through a certain set of processes wherein every pod then gets to a level wherein they know that in alignment with the overall verticals vision and strategy, where do my pod kind of fit in, right? And they carve out their own strategy based on that. and then they run an exercise saying that this is how we are going to, like, given my goals that I have, this is how my strategy on the pod side would be. And this is run by so the vision to strategy exercise is done by like business and product leaders, like entire team together. Obviously there's a single threaded leader responsible for it, but everyone from the vertical, all the leaders from the vertical, and also the one downs are like involved in that actually. And then when it's done at a pod level, the same thing, like the business leads and the product leads, etc., do it at a pod level also. Now once you do that, then the output of that is like clear set of OKRs, which says that, okay, with owners saying that if this is my strategy, this is what I need to do. There's a clear set of OKRs that I need to achieve, with owners either from a business side or a design side or a product side to achieve that. And once you have that, then you have a list of things that you need to do to achieve a strategy. You have the owners, and then you are free to execute on that front. So typically, this is the framework that we try to use.
Excellent. It's great. Just I love hearing the different approaches that different kind of teams are using, and they're all kind of similar in ways, but slightly different. So that's great. The one thing that I want to touch on, and back to the concept of product UX design, when in setting the strategy, and kind of to Shreya's point of, you need to validate that what you're doing is the right thing to do. I saw a survey where it said they asked product managers, UX and designers, who is responsible for user research or interviewing users, and everybody said it was them primarily. So product managers said they were responsible for talking to the users to understand their needs. Researchers said, well, no, it's clearly us. And designers said, well, we have to understand the needs to design the solution. So is there any kind of overlap between the roles, or do you have very clear kind of, okay, product managers look after this, researchers look after this, designers look after this? I might start with you, Shreya, given that you talked quite a bit about the design kind of sprint process.
Yeah, so I would say that there's obviously, you can't say that one person is 100% responsible, because everyone's perspective is also needed to find out that information from the user. Maybe a PM can share their ideas that, can you see if this is possibly that they're looking for? Maybe a question help in finding out what the users want. They can aid it, or maybe they can attend some interviews with the users as well. So that would work. I wouldn't say like one person does a job and then delegates it to the other person to conduct the interviews. That approach might not work at all the places, but I would say that all of them have to collectively play a part because they're working towards same goal. Maybe a researcher is a pro at conducting proper researches and all of that, but what was the objective behind all of that? That has to also come from product and design.
Okay, so in your kind of, if I were to summarize, the objective and the goals come from product, but the designer is the person going out there.
Definitely, yeah, should be.
Okay, we might have some dissenting views. We'll see what happens as we go through. Jay, I'd love to hear from your perspective, because often I've talked to a lot of platform teams and they actually don't have research or designers, because they're kind of saying, look, we're building for developers, so it's just an API or something like that. So do you have researchers and designers in your team looking after your platform? And then who is responsible for kind of doing the end research with the customers to figure out what they need?
Yeah, I mean, like, as developers are also users, right? So we are building a developer community, we are building our APIs, and what are the use cases it is going to cater to, right? So it's very important for to understand the users, right? Because at the end of the day, developers are basically going to be the ambassadors of your APIs, and they will build products on the top of your platform. So even though the persona of the user is quite defined, but still you have to work with the developers, right? So when we go to the developers, our approach is basically being a tag team. We always partner with our user research teams, to get their views, because basically the idea is to work as a team, right? As Shreya has rightly pointed out, they are very good at their job. They execute user interviews and they use all the techniques at their disposal to ensure that we are getting the right answers. but why has to come from product management. And that's how, that why and how gets together, and, the execution happens. So it's more of a tag team, in our case, where we go together and, interview the users. And the responsibility, lies on both the teams.
So quite a similar approach there then. Rajiv,
Yes,
are you going to make it all consistent, or do you have a dissenting view?
No, I think mostly similar. Just few points I would like to add is there are some of the commonalities or common things that each of them do, right? For example, if you product managers or designers or UX researchers, anyone will like take up a phone and call up a user and talk about certain aspects, right? That anyone will do. I think that happens. But where we try to how the team tries to help each other is like look at each other's expertise and then help out the other side on that aspects, right? So for example, when it comes to survey design or like talking to users about something, user research team like a lot of times have the view around what is the right way to do it, right? At that point in time, they will be able to help out the product team and the design team to do it the right way. Once you do that, then you can actually take it forward, right? In a more decentralized way. Whereas now the user research team can do other things like doing more foundational research or doing other things which are more long-term, long horizon sort of things, right? Which maybe the product team and the designers team might not be able to do in that sense. So there is obviously like there are intersections, and then there are like specialities which each of them are responsible for. So this is the mode I've seen it working and working effectively.
Yeah, no, it's great. And that's, I guess, the point of a cross-functional team is that you have those people who can work very closely and complement each other. But on that point, conflict. So there's an example of the whole kind of, so the product manager might have an idea, but the designer has done some, or the researcher has done some research and they have an idea, and the designer is prototypes and they have a different idea, and the developers are saying, no, we can't do that, we should do something else. So when you have that kind of, every person has their core area of speciality, but they're also contributing, how do you deal with conflict? I might start with Jay this time.
So, conflict is inevitable, right? Because as a human, there is always going to be a conflict, right? In terms of, goals and objectives. It's all about, agreeing to a disagreement, right? And, I might sound a bit meta here, but, whenever this happens, at the end of the day, product is getting built for an end user, right? Who is going to use it, right? As long as we have got that persona in mind and what is best for the user, all right, who is going to use the product and what is best for them, that is paramount to anything. Then, every ego vanishes, because if I am building something which is non-usable, then what's the point, right? That's the worst thing that can happen to a product. And I go by that thesis that whatever is best for the product and what is the best for the users, will take that. So that's how, we resolve the conflict in terms of, whose idea is the best, right? The second one, in terms of, deadlines, or, whose prioritization will take, one or the other, or, what are the engineering team's priorities. These are something, we take a conscious call. Like, if we do this, then what will happen? And what is the impact analysis of taking one over the other? So then there we become, a more scientific approach as to, what is the impact? If I go with the option A, what will be the outcome? And if I go with the option B, what will be the outcome? And we lay down the guardrails of, market will be addressing to what is the dollar value which is tagged to a particular feature, what is the resource that is required to pull that off. All these calculations gets into picture. So for prioritization, it's more scientific, but the Uber goal is to ensure that, customer is taken care of. So it's more of a rallying cry, so to say, and, everything for the customer.
Does anybody have, I'll leave it open to Shri or Rajiv, do you have an example where, even though it's kind of the customer, like I've been in a situation where people are saying, no, this is right for the customer, no, this is right for the customer. So there has been that conflict. Do either of you have an example?
So I would say that, see, whenever a person is having a conflict, for example, I'm having a conflict as a designer, it is based on something. It's based on my experience. It's based on what I have seen for the users, or it's based on a proof. And Jay was also saying that what numbers are associated. If I have that concrete evidence attached to it, that is my influence to resolve the conflict with other team as a designer. I can talk more from the design point of view, right? That I would resolve a conflict only on the basis of the evidences that I have as a designer. Only then I can put my point ahead. And it's not us versus them. Obviously, it's not us versus them. It's the shared understanding that you want to build for the product. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think going back to what Jay was also mentioning, right? I think there needs to be a certain level of maturity to deal with these conflicts, right? Obviously, we are like working in a creative space, and there will be opinions, and there will be strongly held opinions, weakly held opinions, etc. But then, how do we deal with this is very important, and that's where I feel that mature teams understand the boundaries, right? They know that which of the decisions I'm accountable for and I need to live with it, and which of the decisions are some things which I'm trying to influence, right? So for example, I can have, as a product manager, I probably have a opinion or like a suggestion about a design interaction, but at the end of the day I have to understand that is the designer's call, right? Like they'll probably, in that case, they will take the decision. Similarly, I might have an opinion about implementation decision. At the end of the day, I know that my engineering team is responsible for taking that decision, right? So knowing where to draw the line between actually suggesting or recommending or influencing and taking a step back when that happens, when there is a counter, and understanding when to agree to disagree, as Jay was saying. I think that's more of an art than a science, but that's how healthy teams operate, I guess.
Yeah, no, this has been a fantastic conversation. I've really enjoyed it. I could keep going for ages, but unfortunately we are out of time. But I hope everybody has enjoyed listening to it. I've really enjoyed having the conversation. So thank you, Rajiv, Shreya, and Jay, and thank you for all your contribution.
Thank you, Rod. Thank you, everyone. Bye.